She was graceful. She was hopeful. She sang to woodland creatures. And now, she has been reimagined into a shallow grave. Snow White, born 1937, died 2025. Cause of death? Narrative malpractice, character defamation, and a fatal overdose of modern studio notes. I am the Pompous Critic, and today I do not simply review. I perform an autopsy. A bit late, seeing how the corpse is 3 weeks decomposed. Nevertheless, let us begin the dissection. Disney, once the purveyor of dreams, now the manufacturer of lifeless, algorithmically generated reimaginings that drain the very magic from our childhoods like a corporate vampire thirsting for nostalgia-fueled box office revenue. And today, dear viewers, I have the distinct displeasure of discussing their latest act of cinematic atrocity, Snow White, a film that looks upon one of animation's greatest masterpieces and boldly declares, what if we remade this, stripped it of all of the things that people loved about it in the first place, and replaced those things with stuff that nobody actually asked for? Gone is the romance. Gone is the whimsy. Gone are the 7 dwarves, because apparently even fairy tale minors must now pass a corporate diversity review. And in their place, a self-serious empowerment lecture disguised as entertainment. So grab your poison apples, Lord knows you'll need them, and prepare yourselves, because today we embark on a journey through this joyous exercise in revisionism. Welcome, dear cinephiles, to a tale of what happens when art and storytelling is abandoned in favor of messaging and propaganda. Let us begin. Snow White, the timeless tale of vanity, innocence, and the dangers of accepting produce from strangers. Reimagined, of course, by the ever-wise creative minds at modern-day Disney, who have set out to fix what was never broken. This latest iteration follows the titular princess, who, rather than embodying the gentle, graceful figure of yore, has been refashioned into a fierce and independent, drink every time you hear that word, visionary leader, destined not merely to overthrow a monarchy and lead a rebellion, because, naturally, a woman finding true love and happiness was simply too offensive a premise for today's audiences. The evil queen is still motivated by her relentless pursuit of fairest in the land status, now rules the kingdom with an iron fist. But when the magic mirror informs her that Snow White exists, she does not merely wish to eliminate her youthful competition. No, that would be far too subtle. Instead, the queen demands Snow White's execution as a political necessity, because apparently, in this new vision, Snow White is not a naive girl exiled into the woods, but a threat to the state. Enter the huntsman, who fails to complete his task, and instead sends the revolutionary princess into the wilderness, where she finds neither dwarves nor their simple yet enduring woodland cottage. No, dear viewers, for such a depiction would be problematic. Instead, she encounters a band of magical creatures whose very existence is the result of a focus group scrambling to avoid perceived offense. These creatures conveniently do not merely offer refuge, but align with her noble cause, reinforcing the film's core theme, that Snow White is not here to be rescued, nor to find love, but to single-handedly reclaim the throne and be the leader she was destined to be. Meanwhile, in a plot development straight from the Who in the Name of Aphrodite even asked for this playbook, Snow White is aided not by the traditional Prince Charming, but by a new character named Jonathan. Because of course she needs a male companion, just not one who serves the antiquated purpose of loving her unconditionally. Instead, Jonathan exists to support her vision, her destiny, her leadership, while remaining secondary to her journey, lest the film's message be muddied by something as offensive as romantic chemistry. The climax sees Snow White marching upon the Queen's castle, armed with the unwavering righteousness of a character who has done absolutely nothing to earn it, and having a knack for remembering names. Confronting the evil Queen, not as a frightened girl, but as a symbol of progress and empowerment. After some obligatory CGI spectacle, the Queen is vanquished, the kingdom is liberated, and Snow White takes her rightful place on the throne. Because nothing says happily ever after like dismantling the monarchy and installing yourself as ruler in the name of justice. And so, with neither romance nor imagination, neither magic nor charm, the tale of Snow White has been rewritten for a modern audience. An audience who, one assumes, prefers mediocre and soulless moralistic lectures over fairy tales, and finds empowerment in the eradication of joy. This is Snow White, a film that, rather than seeking to enchant, instead grits its teeth, clenches its fists, and demands to be taken seriously, as though unaware that the very essence of Snow White was never about revolution, but about innocence, beauty, and the triumph of love over envy. But alas, dear viewers, that is a tale for a different, more sensible time. Snow White, what was once a simple and timeless fairy tale, has now been contorted into a self-serious, dreary, politically charged lecture on self-empowerment, as if the very notion of beauty, romance, and classic storytelling were crimes against modern sensibilities. With this in mind, let us examine this joyless reconstruction of a classic through the grand monocle of the cinematic connoisseur's Compendium of Aesthetic Judgments, and see just how far Disney has fallen from the lofty heights of its golden age. First, we're going to look at the cinematic vision. The word vision implies clarity, purpose, and an understanding of what makes a story work. Snow White possesses none of these things. Instead, it is a film at war with itself, simultaneously clinging to the Disney brand, while doing everything in its power to distance itself from the magic that made it famous. Gone are the whimsy, the romance, and the fairy tale wonder. In their place, we have a self-serious allegory for leadership, monarchy, and social rebellion, because apparently enough of those movies haven't been forced down our gullets. As if the audience entered expecting a historical drama rather than a fantasy about an innocent princess and a jealous queen. Whatever direction the filmmakers intended, the result is a muddled ideological exercise masquerading as entertainment. For this category, Snow White achieves a score of 3 out of 20. Now we're going to discuss the performances. Rachel Zegler, tasked with embodying one of the most delicate and ethereal figures in animated history, instead delivers a modern, rebellious heroine with all the warmth of a wet dishcloth. Her Snow White is not charming, nor enchanting, nor even particularly likable. She is resolute, defiant, and perpetually on the verge of delivering a TED Talk on systemic oppression. Gal Gadot, despite being visually well cast as the evil queen, delivers a performance so abysmal, over the top, and clumsy that she appeared less like a queen and more like a drunk aunt at a child's birthday party. And her accent definitely takes you out of the film. As for Andrew Burnap's Jonathan, well, his very existence is an affront to storytelling. A prince who is not a prince. He exists not to inspire, nor to add depth to the story, but merely to provide Snow White with a male companion who does not threaten her narrative dominance. He was no more than an apparatus. There is no chemistry, there is no heart. There is no performance worthy of a fairy tale. For this particular category, Snow White only gets 2 points out of 15. Now let us discuss screenwriting. The original Snow White script was not complex, nor did it need to be. It was an elegant, poetic fable, balancing simplicity with emotional resonance. Snow White 2025, however, is the cinematic equivalent of a college freshman who just discovered political theory and refuses to speak about anything else. Dialogue is stilted and agenda-driven, and characters exist not to serve a story, but to deliver statements. Gone are the heartfelt moments, the innocence, the gentle humor. Instead, the audience is treated to sermons disguised as conversations, and characters who speak in bullet points rather than emotions. Subplots dangle and fizzle, the story lurches rather than flows, and one gets the distinct impression that no one involved actually wanted to tell a fairy tale at all. This category gets 4 points out of a possible 15. The next category we're going to discuss is cinematography. Visually, the film is neither a triumph nor a complete failure. The landscapes are grand, the lighting is moody, and the color palette attempts to straddle fantasy and realism, though the result feels muted and lifeless. The visual compositions often fail to inspire the same sense of dreamlike wonder that defined the original. The CGI-created magical creatures, are strangely artificial, robbing the film of both personality and warmth. It is competent, yes, but uninspired and dreary, a visual equivalent of eating an unsalted cracker. For this category, Snow White gets 6 points out of 15. Now let's talk pacing and editing. A fairy tale should move like a lullaby, soft, flowing, effortless. Instead, Snow White drags like an unmotivated student through a term paper. Some scenes linger too long in moments that do not matter, while others rush through the few genuinely interesting sequences with the urgency of a film desperate to meet its runtime requirements. Romantic beats, or what few remain, feel obligatory rather than earned, and the climax unfolds with the excitement of a procedural paperwork review. Gone is the tension, the build-up, the anticipation. The film moves, but never enchants. For this category, Snow White will get 3 points out of 15. The next category is score and sound design. Here we find one of the few tolerable aspects of the film. The music is serviceable if forgettable, offering none of the instantly iconic melodies of the original. Snow White's signature songs have been reworked or removed entirely, replaced with modern Broadway-esque numbers that, while technically well-crafted, lack the simplicity and charm of the classic score. Sound design is adequate, though unremarkable, but one does not leave Snow White humming a tune or recalling a single stirring moment, a devastating failure for a Disney musical. It gets 4 out of 10 points in this category. The final category is cultural significance. One might assume that a remake of the first ever animated feature film would be an event of profound cultural importance. Instead, Snow White 2025 enters the cinematic landscape not as a celebration of legacy, but as an unnecessary experiment in revisionism. It does not honor its predecessor. It actively resents it. The legacy of Snow White will remain intact. This iteration, however, will not be remembered as a beloved reimagining, but rather as an instructive failure, a cautionary tale about the perils of prioritizing messaging over magic. In the end, the cultural significance this film will most be remembered for is the ubiquitous hate that has been bestowed upon it. For this category, Snow White receives 3 out of 10 points. And here we are. The sad score for Snow White is 25 out of 100 points. What was once a timeless fairy tale has been forcibly reconstructed to a bland, mechanical piece of corporate propaganda, desperate to convince its audience that fairy tales must be modernized to be relevant, as if the original had not already stood the test of time for nearly a century. I would like to take this opportunity to formally declare that your dear Pompous Critic only recognizes 2 versions of Snow White as being canonical. The original 1937 Disney classic, and of course the delightfully rambunctious Snow White and the 7 Inches. I assure you, you'll never look at dwarves the same way again after that viewing. I know I haven't. And so, dear cinephiles, we must bid farewell to the Disney that once understood magic, and accept that they no longer wish to enchant us, but to instruct us, but in reality bore us. A tragedy, perhaps. But as we leave this cinematic disaster in the dust, let us at least remember this. The fairest of them all, this film is not. In a landscape plagued by obnoxious feminism injected like heroin into the veins of entertainment, this film is the most obnoxious of them all. A grim ordeal. One watches not for pleasure, but out of duty or masochism. Try to guess which of the 2 it was for me. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.